Hello, everybody. We are back with SAMexpert live on two platforms. On YouTube, we actually stream video. So if you want to see our faces, there's a YouTube link in the comments. And on LinkedIn, this is the last audio event of the year. And I don't know if you're aware, LinkedIn is killing audio events. So unfortunately or fortunately, it doesn't really matter. Next year, all the events will be video again. Well, for some reason, LinkedIn just didn't like the audio events. Nevertheless, we are talking today about service provider strategy with Microsoft licensing, a very niche topic. And there's a lot going on, and I'll go through each and every topic. With me today, I have Brett LaForge from Octopus Cloud, but I know Brett even before that, virtually, and I actually met him only recently. But in 2014, when I wanted to learn about Microsoft SPLA, his blog, there was no name. He called himself SPLA Man. His blog was the only source on the internet with information about Microsoft SPLA licensing. Even Microsoft's website had nothing on it. And as less frequently as I want, I also have Daryl with me, Daryl Ullman, co-founder of SAMexpert and the chief negotiation expert. And Daryl is much more strategic. I'm much more about licensing. Daryl is much more about finance and strategy. So I hope he can provide us with his view about the whole relationship between Microsoft providers and clients, and how it all is going to, in our opinion, play out in 2025 and beyond. And, for us, it's a Christmas event. Those who are watching us on YouTube, you can see we put a nice Christmas picture behind us because, it's our Christmas movie. It's our Christmas message. It's our message for 2025 for all our followers, listeners, and whoever randomly finds this video, or there'll be a podcast as well, a podcast recording. Those on LinkedIn, unfortunately, we can't take audio questions today. So if you want to ask us a question, please either DM me on LinkedIn. If you listen on LinkedIn, it's just native, just one click away, or switch to YouTube and just type your messages in the chat. So, and I will begin with drawing the picture of what's going on and what happened in 2024. Lots has been going on recently since end of 2022, because previously service providers licensing was very simple. It was just Microsoft SPLA and nothing else. It was the program where providers paid monthly fees to Microsoft and had the right to provide services to end clients, including Microsoft licenses. And then it all went sideways, not necessarily in a bad manner. So whether bad or good, we'll discuss that. So now we have Bring Your Own License, which for about 2 years already is quite simple, actually. You need to have an active subscription if you're an end client. And if your provider lets you bring licenses, you can bring them. Simple as that. It's not rocket science. So for providers, there's a question of whether they should embrace BYOL or not. So again, another question to discuss. Last year, but clarified this year, Microsoft also gave end clients an option to bring SQL Server on a pay-as-you-go model, which is hosted on a provider, but paid to Azure, which is another complication. And now we have Windows Server with Azure Arc, same pay-as-you-go option, which is not yet allowed on service providers. And there's a big question whether it will be, because why not? Then again, no, it's not black and white. There's no good or bad, in my opinion. This is my personal opinion. We have experts on the call that we'll discuss this. And there's another promise that Microsoft hasn't fulfilled yet, although they promised, and the deadline is February 2025, is the Azure Stack HCI for hosters. Another Azure thing that they may introduce for providers to use to host their own clients. So we have all this complexity, but what I would start with, and I'll go back to each of those items and explain try and explain it in human terms. And Daryl is here to control me because he likes when I explain it in human terms. I'll start with a simple question, because we get messages from providers, panicking messages, due to various reasons. They heard it from Microsoft, they heard it from the reseller. SPLA is dying. So, Brett, can you pick this one up, please?
Thanks, Sasha. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I've been in this business now since 2006, I think, and I worked for the one of the first resellers for SPLA. And even back then, right? So SPLA is just brand new, pretty much in the industry. There was that ASP model, but then Microsoft introduced the service provider licensing agreement, and everything was going well. Then a couple of years later, SPLA is going away because Microsoft introduced BPOS. Like, who remembers BPOS, right? The Business Productivity Online Suite. They said, "Oh, that's going to replace SPLA. SPLA's gone." Okay, then Azure came about. Okay, Azure's replacing my data center. Then Office 365 came out. Okay, now I can't compete with Microsoft. And there's all these different, reasons why SPLA is dying, but yet it's still here, and it certainly still has its place in this industry, in my opinion. Talking to some hosters, they historically would complain about SPLA, but as new programs are being introduced, a lot of them are saying, "Hey, I like SPLA over maybe CSP." And why? Because they can control the end customer. Like they're controlling the licensing, they're controlling who accesses what, they control where their data is located. If their customer wants to kiss and hug their server goodnight, they can do that. And so there's a lot of talking to some hosters, like I said, there's a lot of benefits to that. It's I don't know, like I can't predict tomorrow. No one can. But what I can say is, for the past how many years, right? SPLA is going away, and Sasha, here we are. So,
Well, I need to make this remark is that Microsoft actually officially promised it to the European Association of Cloud Providers that they're not going to kill SPLA until at least 2029. So from that point of view, it's kind of, we have a few years of peace of mind. And Daryl, what's your take on that? What do you think? What is your strategic opinion about this?
I believe SPLA is here to stay, and 5 years is a long, long time. And so much can change, and so much will change in 5 years. Yet, if I was to take a decision as a decision maker within a cloud provider, I would stick to SPLA. I think it's still one of the better programs out there. You can control your cost. You can predict your cost if you have the right tools in place. Again, you need to have process, methodology, governance tools in place. I wouldn't run away from SPLA. Microsoft is trying to frighten cloud providers, hosters, application providers away from SPLA, and we'll talk about the tactics that they're using today. Bit of, I call them scare tactics. They wouldn't be using it if they're going to kill the program in a year. They would just wait it out. But they can't kill it. You touched on that. There are multiple organizations that are overseeing competition that just won't let it happen. The European Union, the various regulatory bodies within the union are not going to allow Microsoft to basically monopolize the market, because what it means is that if they kill SPLA, it doesn't matter what they introduce, everything's going to be Azure based. It's going to be a complete monopoly. It won't go under the radar. This is not Microsoft trying to move for the last 20 years from EAs to something else. This is, I think it's got a profound impact on the competitive environment. So just to summarize a very long answer, I believe SPLA is with us for many years to come.
let me ask this: why do you think Microsoft would want to kill SPLA? Like, so all these years, right? There's very few resources. Sasha, you touched on it. There was nothing on SPLA on their website. You had to go to my website, SPLAlicensing.com, to get information. Why is that? And it's an interesting point, because I don't have the statistics, but I hear rumors that it's at least a $7 billion business, right? Like globally. And can you imagine for a moment, Daryl, as a co-owner of an organization, like imagine running a $7 billion business with very little overhead, because you don't pay licensing experts, because you rely on resellers to do that, right? The licensing is complex, but yet you audit, so there's that benefit too. So what's the driving force behind getting rid of SPLA? I think it's a rhetorical question. I don't know, but it's interesting.
So it's an interesting way that you've just positioned it as a $7 billion business. And if I was a company, that's a nice cash cow in anybody's world, even in Microsoft's multi-billion-dollar ecosystem. I would say that the only reason potentially to kill it is to kill competition. Yeah. So I think Microsoft looks at the hosting providers as some type of direct competition. Even though they are a hyperscaler, different scale of business, they still view them. Microsoft's always been paranoid. Now, let's go back a second. Microsoft's business culture is a paranoid type of culture. It's been there since the start. I was at Microsoft back in the 2000s. I don't think it's changed. And they're paranoid that they're going to lose business. They're going to be a new competition, a new competitor, something's going to change in the marketplace. I think it goes back to the days of when they didn't predict the power of the web browser, and they didn't understand the mobile direction of the business. When I'm going back, and I think it's stuck. So they are basically out there, I would say, to make sure that competitors do not, or that there's a minimum amount of competition in the market, and what they can control, they won't even control more. And SPLA, there's no control, actually.
Well, yeah, and I agree from a competitive perspective, but I think one of the downfalls of SPLA for Microsoft is the end customer. Like, they don't know why an end customer is using Joe's Hosting, hypothetical made up name, but Joe's Hosting instead of using Azure. Like, they don't know especially in a multi-tenant environment, they don't know why their end customers are buying Windows Server. What are they doing with their applications? And that's a big problem for Microsoft, because they want to understand who's consuming their product and why are they consuming it. And under SPLA, there's really no, that information's kind of, I don't know, for no lack of a better word, not there. I don't know. And I think that's one of the issues that I see. And to your point about competition, I think that's always been the case. I think even hosters look at Microsoft to some degree as competition, especially for an infrastructure provider. And they ask themselves, okay, well, how do I compete? And I think one of the ways you do compete, like if that's your strategy, right? Like, maybe not compete, but what's your differentiator? Yeah. And I think if your differentiator is, to me, would be SPLA. Because you look at all these other programs that are out there, like Sasha, you touched on this, looking at 2024, there's all these different programs like flexible virtualization, CSP-Hoster, all this stuff, right? But all that's about the end customer. And I think at the end of the day, it's what differentiates you? Because even under the flexible virtualization program, I know I'm throwing a lot of terminology out there, you don't have to have a SPLA agreement in order to be offer that kind of service, the flexible virtualization. And so basically, in a nutshell, if that's the case, then my next door neighbor could be an authorized outsourcer. I could be an authorized like anybody could be an authorized outsourcer. So from that aspect, your competition is growing exponentially. And so the question I have for hosters is really, what differentiates you from a Joe's hosting down the street? What separates you from Azure or AWS? And for me, I think that answer is, hey, we're a one-stop shop for all your licensing needs. You can use flexible virtualization, you can use SPLA, we can use CSP, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's about, hey, controlling your customer. And anyways.
No, I
Sure.
look, Brett, I agree with everything you've said, and I want to add on to that. I think Microsoft has one of the last areas where Microsoft has got zero control is everything to do with hosters and with SPLA licensing. It hasn't evolved.
Mhm.
If we look at the world of commercial volume licensing, that has taken a leap, a huge leap, from on-prem, almost total, just a few years ago, to 365, and of course, everything to do with the infrastructure, server-based data centers that's slowly moving, or it's moving, not slowly, but actually pretty rapidly. And Microsoft's got control. They've gained control. They've got insight. They control the pricing. It's almost like an automatic gauge. You want to make more money? All you do, you just update a price list and the gauge goes up. You don't have to do anything else. With SPLA, it's still based on almost, I would say, goodwill of the provider to report according to actual usage. And I'll say something that are almost inside information. If Microsoft is listening, it's very, very difficult to stay compliant. It's a huge undertaking. And Microsoft knows that.
Yeah.
That's why they audit. If they move everyone off SPLA potentially, well, they can't because competition, they can't really because of the competitive landscape. But they would want to move everybody to the Azure Stack. Just gain control. It's all a game of control and moving the needle whenever you want to. No better business than that in the world.
Well, there's also protecting annuity. Daryl, you came from Microsoft. Did you come before that annuity became a holy grail of Microsoft? We need annuity. We need that, software assurance everywhere. Actually, yeah. Well, so
I was there in
enterprise
1999 when they introduced software assurance, moved from
software assurance, yeah.
Upgrade Advantage or whatever that was called back in the day when I was still young.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they introduced EAs. So annuity is a huge, huge differentiator in Microsoft. They basically coined that term, I would say, to my opinion, of annuity. They changed the market, okay? They changed the market. They changed the concept, how you consume, how you pay for software. They're definitely the leader in that aspect. Oh, maybe not the leader. I think AWS for a few years overtook them in that commercial offering, and they played catch up for quite a few years. But in general, they are an annuity company, and that's what the shareholders love.
Yeah.
Predictability. SPLA is not a predictable business. Okay, well, to a certain degree it is. Okay, let's not get, but it's not as predictable as 365. It's not as predictable as Azure.
I want to interrupt you because we've been discussing one thing for 18 minutes already. I want to build up on what you just said, which was not in the agenda, but it's very important because it's a recent trend. Taking the statement from Brett about this is a $7 billion business, and then looking at the massive number of various providers, starting from somebody who only reports $1,000 per month SPLA licenses, it does seem, we can't disclose the details, but it does seem like that Microsoft is trying to, right now, to begin from that low end, where there are tiny providers, where they might use different methods to get rid of their SPLA agreements. And one of them, for example, is a gaining very big traction right now. Service provider trade law compliance audit, where licensing compliance is not verified. What they look at is business practices. And if you think about the contractual law point of view, breach of anti-corruption laws and sanction laws, those two areas, it's actually legally much more serious than a financial loss of underreported licenses. And that could be used potentially as a leverage to start getting rid of smaller SPLA providers to kind of move them off to flexible virtualization benefit. Why not? I mean, we helped European providers this year to completely move off SPLA, a couple of providers, move off SPLA to full 100% flexible virtualization benefit. They have no responsibility now. You know, the clients just bring their licenses. Yes, they have compliance responsibilities, but they're much less complex. But what Microsoft gains from that is KYC. They know their clients because BYOL, bring your own licenses, effectively. They know whom they sold those licenses, the end clients. And subscriptions are at least annual, annuity. So Microsoft ticks both boxes by squeezing out that little segment and also telling them, why don't you embrace bring your own license? And again, I'm not entirely against it, because for some of them, it's actually a good model financially. So what do you think about that?
You know, that goes back to Microsoft not killing the SPLA. So as there's no roadmap to migrate customers off the SPLA and provide them with a better or an optional framework, they are basically pushing them off the SPLA, and they're starting with the smaller customers, the smaller providers, Microsoft customers, the smaller providers, those that are just causing Microsoft a lot of headaches. Those, as you said, those 1,000 to 5,000 a month hosters. And the way that they're doing it, yes, they are providing options, and they're not bad, the options. I don't know. I'm not saying they're not bad. But again, it goes back to the tactics that Microsoft use. And we can talk a lot about that, but I would say that they absolutely still use their position in the market, their size in the market. You as a small provider, and this is, we can talk about ethics. You as a small provider, when you receive an audit notice, and it's in Microsoft's rights, don't misunderstand me, they have the right to audit, they have the right to verify compliance, everything is right, everything's okay. But Microsoft's not only doing it to verify compliance. Right? Microsoft's got a much larger agenda, and that's to move as many providers over to Azure. Now, legitimate, not legitimate, anti-competitive or not, I'm going to leave that for a completely different discussion. But the fact is, you don't want to get hit with an audit. It is such a strenuous process. We have customers phoning us, or no, nobody phones these days, but having meeting with us after they even get a self-verification audit, very light touch, or they get as you pointed out, Sasha, and we've seen that quite a lot lately, the contractual audits. Haven't seen that before, actually. Well, I did, but once every. Now all of a sudden we received like half a dozen phone calls or appointments over the last month. So something definitely is moving the gauge there. I think it's just another strategy. Yes, there are anti-corruption laws that need to be upheld, and there are countries that are on the no-sell list that U.S. law does not allow reselling of software licenses to, like Russia, no secret, and other countries in the Middle East. I don't think it's coming from there again. I just think it's another angle that Microsoft is taking to defer smaller providers from continuing their SPLA business. That's my take. It's just my objective view of how Microsoft has been working over the years and the strategies they take.
Brett, do you have any take on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying, Daryl. We talked a lot about SPLA going away and all that stuff, but one of the downfalls of SPLA, let's talk about that for a second, is it's a very reactionary program, right? Like you even report for the previous month. And I think a lot of service providers have that mindset of it's reactionary, where we talk a lot about these different programs over the last year or so, like Azure Arc as an example. Daryl, you mentioned, hey, at the end of an audit, there's usually an Azure commitment. And by that time, it's almost a guessing game, right? So if you go through an audit and you owe a bunch of money and Microsoft says, hey, but you don't have to pay us cash, you can do an Azure commitment. And they say, okay, let's do it. Where I've worked with service providers who said, hey, I can't meet this commitment after 3 years. I'm like, well, you have a signed contract. They will hold you to that, right? And I guess my point here is, instead of being reactionary, I think it's best. Well, I know it's best to be proactive with all these different decisions that you have to make, because it's not just SPLA anymore. It's not just CSP-Hosting. It's not volume licensing. It's everything together, right? And so if you're a business owner, and you get audited, at that point it's too late. But you want to also make sure that whatever program you choose to do is going to be the most profitable for your organization. Microsoft may force you and say, you use Azure Arc, it's the best thing since sliced bread. Well, how do you know that? How do you know that using customer-owned licenses inside your data center is great and you don't have to mess with SPLA? But in doing so, guess what, Mr. Hoster? You're losing out on licensing revenue because your end customer is buying the licenses from somebody. And guess where they're not buying it from is you. And so there's all these different scenarios that you really have to work out. And I think it's really important is, before you decide to move to somebody else's data center, whether it's Google, AWS, Azure, whatever, make sure you have an understanding of what's happening inside your own data center first. And we're always going to talk about SPLA going away. We're always going to talk about all these different licensing programs. But at the end of the day, it's about what's best for you as an organization, regardless of what Microsoft does or any other publisher for that matter. We can't control what's going to happen tomorrow, but what you can control today is, ensuring what you're doing is accurate. Because not only is that important from a compliancy perspective, I think it's also even more important to ensure that you're charging your customers correctly too. Because what that tells me is, if you're out of compliancy or out of compliant, you're not charging your customers accurately either. And I think that's really important to maybe take a step back and kind of understand what's happening now inside your data center before you start worrying about all these different programs that are out there and what Microsoft is telling you should do.
I want to just add on to that, Brett. You brought up a very good point. Let's call it chargeback, or adequately running your own business.
Yeah.
And there is a huge responsibility on the hosting provider to actually have control of their own business. So they can complain a lot about Microsoft audit practices. I agree, about the legitimacy or the what's behind that initiative and why Microsoft is auditing and the compromises around Azure commitments and so on. But ultimately, there's still a responsibility on the side of the business owner that is running a multi-million-dollar business. They have not implemented, most of them, okay, I'm going to be blunt here. I won't say most. A large percentage do not have any control over their environments. Yes, Microsoft hasn't provided tools for SPLA. You can complain and you can say why. They had the opportunity many times to provide tools. They don't like providing tools to manage their own licenses. So where's your own responsibility? Not only for compliance, that's one part of it, but we've met multiple customers that are even undercharging their customers. I'm not even talking about overcharging. They're undercharging their customers for something they actually are paying for to Microsoft and to other vendors. This is not only Microsoft. There are multiple software platforms out there that you need to have to run your business. So you're actually losing money because you haven't got around to implement the right tooling, the right governance, and the right process. So,
yeah, I worked for a reseller, and I used to see SPLA reporting every month, right? And I remember I would argue the majority of them reported the same thing month in, a month out. And so you're either not growing your business or something is off there. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is service providers should look at SPLA reporting not as a requirement by Microsoft. Yes, it's a requirement by Microsoft, but they should also use it as business intelligence and saying, okay, in March 2024, I used 100 SQL enterprise licenses. March 2023, I did 110, whatever it is. Like, how are you ensuring like what you're doing is accurate? And also, it provides you some historical data based on, customer habits. Maybe to your point about, undercharging your customer. Well, maybe there's a way you could reduce some of your licensing spend by maybe consolidating servers. And it's just, it was very interesting to me because Sasha, you brought up, customers that are reporting $1,000 a month, and those were typically the guys that just reported the same thing over month. And I wanted to tell Microsoft, and I think Microsoft knows this, is if you're going to audit anybody, audit the guy who reports $1,000 a month, because I'm sure they're the ones that are mostly out of compliance.
You actually hit the nail on the head, because I used to work alongside Microsoft, and that's what I was told openly by some people. It's the red flag number one for a service provider when they continue reporting exactly the same numbers, month over month, because SPLA is not static. Even when you deal with clients like schools whom you onboard on the 3-year long contract basis, there are still numbers that should be moving, and if they're not moving, it means that the provider is not in control, and they are probably an easy target. And what we find is they usually are.
Yeah.
So tip number one, whoever's listening, is that if you are constantly reporting the same numbers every single month, you are at a higher risk of an audit. So think about that one.
Exactly. So just summarizing what was told, and I think we're going to probably be online for another 7 to 10 minutes. What we all see, and I think you might agree, if you feel free to disagree with me as well, is that all those new programs that Microsoft introduces, they all try to solve exactly the same exact Microsoft's goals. It's switching to annual licenses, switching to end user subscriptions, removing that flexibility from the end clients and from the customers, which SPLA provides, and also hiding behind the service providers, because service providers have to report their client numbers, but only for client details, but only for large clients, not for everybody. So smaller clients are not being seen by Microsoft, and so Microsoft just wants to retain control. And with the introduction of SQL with Azure Arc, speaking about negative effects, SQL Server with Azure Arc, potentially Windows Server with Azure Arc, which is not yet allowed, but maybe, we don't know, and especially Azure Stack HCI, which is multi-tenant for hosters, that is promised to CSP, to the European Association, latest February next year. Hopefully they will keep to that promise. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see about that. That is all effectively tying people up into Azure, because billing on those products goes through Azure. It goes through Microsoft. Money, even via CSP resellers, even when the provider is the CSP reseller. The relationship, the financial relationship, is, yes, there's an intermediary, but it's effectively with Microsoft. There is a Microsoft customer agreement involved. There is no more flexibility of SPLA, where you could just lift and shift from one provider to another. Model doesn't change. But on the other hand, we get questions from providers and opinions from some providers saying, you know what, I actually like Azure Arc. I actually like the ability to provide Azure Stack HCI because they see it as another revenue stream. So there's no single opinion in the market that SPLA is good, Azure Arc is bad. We have opinions about that from all sides of the spectrum. And my question would be, for example, say you're there and you are, of course, I will double down on you need to first understand what's going on in your data centers. Really have a very good look at that, because you can't take those decisions. Shall I switch to CSP hosting? Shall I do this? If you don't really know what's going on. So that's very important. But if I'm in that mood of, I'm being bombarded by resellers, you need to switch to CSP hosting. I want to keep SPLA. I don't want to keep SPLA. I hear this. I hear that. I want to make a strategic decision in 2025. How should I approach that? What's the words of caution, or maybe what would be the actionable items from your point of view?
Yeah, I think, you nailed it too, having an understanding of what's going on inside your own data center. But I also think you have to understand your options, right? Like Microsoft and resellers, and I don't mean to pick on Microsoft or anything like that, but I do feel that it's being promoted as like the greatest thing ever. And I think, the pay-as-you-go model is interesting, right? But it's being promoted too as a scaling solution, like you could scale up and down. But that's very challenging, because imagine that's another thing to manage for a SQL database manager, right? Like I don't even know if it's technically feasible or to scale up and down on a regular basis, like it's being promoted. The other thing is incentives. You always have to pay attention to the incentives that's out there, because the one thing that's consistent with incentives is what? They go down. And so it's difficult to make a business decision as you're trying to plan for the future based on either incentives your resellers offering to you or incentives that Microsoft is offering to you. I think everything has its place, but what it really boils down to is what's right for your organization. And those are, you mentioned some things to pay attention to. Well, how does pay-as-you-go fit into your business model? Is that something that you would find useful or beneficial? Are you going to be more profitable by offering something like that? Or is SPLA like a greater differentiator, as we talked to earlier? And what is your strategy as an organization? Because to your point, like Sasha, you mentioned your reseller is going to talk to you about this. Microsoft's going to talk to you about this. Managed service provider is going to talk to you about this. Like, again, it's not necessarily saying Azure Stack is bad, or what do they call Azure Stack HCI, Azure Local now, I think is the new terminology. Like, is that something that intrigues your organization? You want to learn more? I guess at the end of the day, make sure whatever you do, don't base your decision off an audit, right? Like, I don't have to pay up front for this audit anymore. I could commit to this program because it's great. Really do your due diligence now, instead of waiting till it's too late, making a decision based off financials rather than more strategic. I don't know. It's a long answer. I get it. And maybe it's not as definitive, but I guess my point is you have to do what's right for you. And there are different programs out there, and we're here to help educate you and coach you through these different options as an independent organization. But I think you really have to take a step back and say, okay, what is our what is our Microsoft strategy going into 2025 and beyond? Having said that, knowing SPLA is not going away, I think we kind of confirmed that, especially, they haven't canceled agreements. So SPLA is a 3-year agreement. So it's at least good till December 2027. So having all these different models that are out there and programs, what's going to benefit you as an organization going into 2025 and beyond?
I want to bring up one more topic, and that is we talked a lot about control of your own data center. And then there's like this there's this concept that there's like a magic wand out there. You move to the cloud and you have more control. I want to tell you a very well-known secret. You're going to pay more on the cloud. And that's not a gut feeling. That's numbers that we see with every single organization we touch on cost optimization. There is, rule of thumb, 30% overspent on the cloud. You know what? Maybe even more. Now, that's hardcore dollars going into Microsoft's pocket that shouldn't be there. And if you look back at the promises initially, when the cloud started, on how much cost, how much savings are going to be made by migrating to the cloud, all these fantastic calculators that were out there showing hardware, resources, time, everything out there, just magically showing how the cloud is going to save you 20-30%, how your bill is going to go down overall. That's not the truth. I'm willing to argue with anyone on the subject. It's basically cost out of control. That's my take on that. So if you're a cloud provider, don't think there's a magic wand that you're going to say, okay, no more audits, no more compliance problems. We don't have to manage our data center. We're going to go to the cloud. Everything's going to be easy. No, it's not going to be easy if you don't have processes in place, you don't have the right billing system in place, and you don't have the right FinOps. And that's a completely different area of expertise. So don't just jump in and do it. You'll be paying 30-40% more. Your margins will drop. You might be out of business in 3 to 4 years, or you might make a move that we're actually seeing now, slowly but surely. I don't know if it's a trend or not, moving back from the cloud to on-premise data centers. Okay, so it's not a huge movement. I'm not going to say now, okay, the world is changing, but we're actually seeing it happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, everyone talks about moving to the cloud, but no one talks about moving away from the cloud.
That's not a sexy topic. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's happening. Okay,
Yeah.
on quite a big scale for some organizations. Where that's going to go, I don't know. Not everything's going to be able to move back, but there is definitely a trend because it's out of control costs.
Yeah.
And Microsoft has a product for that. You want to move off the cloud? Here's Azure Stack HCI, Azure local. That's your local Azure. You want to have it locally, but it's still Azure, but it's local.
Yeah.
Why not?
My perpetual licenses. I wish those days were gonna financially. No,
they're going away. They're taking that away.
They're taking perpetual license options away.
Yeah.
So they're actually killing that option as well.
I want to, just by the end of this live event, I want to take, first of all, thank you very much. I want to take one question that I just received, which is pretty good. So we talk about cost optimization. And I just received a message from a friend of mine saying, but you can't optimize costs of SPLA. You'll be surprised. So we worked with a European provider for over a year, and they reduced their cost by 30%. Some of it with us, some of it following our advice, because to save, you can't just, flip a switch, go negotiate or do something in SPLA. It's not negotiable. The price is a price list. You may get a 1% discount for Microsoft, or we've seen that, a tiny discount for whatever reason. But that's it. But if you're happy to roll up your sleeves, if you're happy to wake up your techies who are attached to the precious design they build. Sorry, I'll be very assertive here and critical and a bit tongue in cheek. you need to change your entire licensing design. First of all, you need to understand what's going on in your data center. So you do need tooling. So we can't avoid the elephant in the room. You need to understand what's going on. You need to also, in addition to the tools, audit your entire business internally. Just understand what are the financial mechanisms there. Either you're charging correctly or incorrectly. Is this the right model for you? So you take all these strategic decisions and then you start reshuffling stuff around. And I'm talking about hardware, changing the core counts in the servers. Moving around virtual machines, and it's not very simple. It's not just isolating Linuxes of Windows and Windows Server. There are additional moving parts there, but it's totally possible. 30%, a real achievement. So yes, it's possible. It's not a complete loss. It's not a flat price program. There are clever things you can do, but if you want to do it just on paper without rolling up your sleeves, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's a good question. I got an email from a hoster who said, I like SPLA because of the Windows data center licensing, and it's cheaper for my customers to get Windows Server through me than it is to get it from somewhere else, than for them to go out and purchase it, because it's the multi-tenant, run unlimited VMs, and it's from a licensing side, it's pretty cost effective. So there are definitely ways to reduce your cost. Matter of fact, I see customers, even during an audit, that are overspending for certain workloads, which is, not unheard of, right? But here's the fact, just because, but then the hoster is going to ask Microsoft, well, can I get a credit for what I overspent? And what's the answer to that, Daryl?
Nope.
There you go.
30 days have gone past. You had your opportunity.
You had your
will
opportunity.
collect what you owe us for the last 3 years, not what you overpaid.
So that's again, going back to understanding what's happening in the data center from a licensing side and ensuring what you're doing is accurate, because you don't want to. I always look at any publisher as like in the United States, like the IRS, like the tax revenue. Like you don't want to pay them any more money than you have to. So let's make sure that you're doing things correctly to get.
Yeah. I just want to leave one more, and we're going to jump off. You mentioned, Brett, and this is something that I don't think everybody understands. When you said that potentially the SPLA business for Microsoft is around $7 billion, give or take, sounds logical to me. On every dollar that you spend on SPLA, basically that contributes at least a 1 to 5 on what the total business is around that. So we're looking at, I think, maybe even more than 1 to 5, maybe 1 to 7. So you're looking at a potential environment built around the SPLA that is worth what, 35 to 50 billion dollars. That's a huge business. There are so many hosters, providers out there that are making a good living off that platform. Instead of trying to migrate them off, this is my note to Microsoft, why don't you help them improve what they're using? Make more money off it. Make them more successful. These are relatively small organizations that are running a multi-billion-dollar environment, providing work for hundreds of thousands of people around the globe, moving economies. I think that's the kind of thought process I would love to hear coming from Microsoft. Not only let's migrate them off because we're going to make more money on Azure. No, let's build up the infrastructure, the economy, the ecosystem, and make sure these guys make more money because they are our partners.
And one thing I developed is a community at Octopus. Like it's a community developed for service providers. So not only can they learn from me and you, Sasha and Daryl, but they could also learn from each other, which I think is really important too. Like, how are you being successful? Or, hey, I'm going through a compliancy situation. What are some best practices?
Yeah.
Hey, Microsoft is promoting Azure Arc to me. Is that really as good as it sounds? Or hey, Google's offering X, Y, and Z. I think that's really cool. It's not just Microsoft, but really any large cloud provider. So it's kind of neat to see, and it's good collaboration, because then what we are is a voice to Microsoft. So to your point, it's like, hey, here's what you're promoting, but here's what hosters are actually saying.
Good point.
Thank you both for participating today. On this note, we will probably end this event, but I think there's more to come. I really like this format. I don't know about you, gents. I actually thought we should have brought what I call an enemy, somebody from the enemy lines. Not really. So, but there's a guy I often argue with on LinkedIn. I won't call his name yet because we haven't agreed about him participating. I want to maybe one day bring him in to listen to the opinion from the reseller side, because that would be very interesting, I think, for many people, just to form opinion based on various information sources. But that's yet to come in 2025. And for those of you who celebrate holidays this time of year, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, happy Christmas, any other events, religious or not. Happy New Year for those countries who don't have any religious holidays. Have a good, fantastic 2025. You know where to find us. By the way, just to plug commercially here in this corner on the video, I regularly change two QR codes. SAMexpert, which is the company that me and Daryl, we represent. And Brad is from Octopus Cloud, so his QR code was there as well for a while. I'll put it back now if you want to scan it. And you can find this video on YouTube. Those of you who prefer audio will release it as a podcast as well, and short episodes. You know the drill. Yes. Any closing words from you, gents?
Another year behind us, another year ahead of us. I've got.
From my side, this was fun. So.
No, a lot of fun. Yeah, I just want to say that on a professional note, that get your financials in order. You're running a business. I'm sorry, I'm saying this out loud because we see so many cases. Take responsibility. Don't wait for Microsoft to do it for you. It will be painful. Okay, get tooling, processes, methodologies. It's not fun, but that's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
All right, I guess it's time to cue the closing music.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, both of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.